Hello. Now, in this video, we're going to talk about how to work as an on-call on a customer support rotation. I'm Benjamin Yu, and let's just get started. So I'll just start off. This is pretty much like a software engineering guide onto what on-call customer support is going to look like. You're going to run your day-to-day. There's a few things you got to watch out for. You might have midnight calls. You might be handling support during the day. So this is kind of idea of like what to prepare for it and what to expect going throughout the day. So Rosa is the guy to keep your pants on when everything's on fire. You don't know what to do because there's a lot of uncertainty when going around with this, and it's a high stress environment. So maybe this will give you some insight on what to look out for. So day one, you're going to want to be able to do the customer support, and you gotta get started with permissions. Um, this pretty much goes on to number two, where you just have to familiarize yourself with tools, dashboards, and logs. And step one to get there is that you have to be able to look at this. So if you're working at like a Microsoft stack, you might be looking at getting your AAD permissions. Talk to your manager about how to get those. But probably the most important thing is to look at these things. So pretty much the expectations around dashboards is that you have nice dashboards. You can see a drop off when something bad happens. So the main idea is that you should be able to look at the dashboard and understand exactly what's going on with your service. If you have like a special case, you might need to look at logs. So you should definitely look at that because if you are looking at a particular customer, you probably need to look at the logs for what's happening with them. But other than that, understand the tools they have to do to support your service. I mean, as a basic thing, a lot of times you're just going to be rebooting your machine or rerunning some kind of workflow that will be your service. So same thing with if you're working at Azure, then maybe you'll be looking at ADO pipelines, Azure DevOps. So be able to like rerun those and reboot machines through like the Azure portal, for instance. Now, number three and four is kind of prerequisites in terms of just having a basic ground zero understanding of what you're supporting because different companies are going to have different expectations of what you want to do. So look at previous tickets. Usually they should have some information about how they were solved, so you can get in there and see how your teammates have solved previous incidents, and you try to emulate that in the start, since that's just the bar of expectation. And number four would be like understanding customer scenarios. As software developers, you would be surprised how often like people don't actually have an idea of what the customers are doing on the website. And this can be especially true in larger corporations where you have people, like teams of people working on like different widgets, I guess, on a website. So for instance, like you're going to have a lot of 20-some software developers working on an online pharmacy, but none of them have any prescription drugs that they purchase. So that's kind of where you have to dig in and really understand what is a customer interface looking like. There's probably test environments that you can look at, or even just going through the main website and really seeing how it works out for people. So once you have that, you're going to start your day today, and I pretty much broke it down into took, crook, and book. So whenever you look at any new ticket, you're going to want to see what the crook took, which is what's the impact. And a lot of times you have to think about like what's the customer asking for, and a lot of times they're going to be saying something like, "Oh, I couldn't write a comment on my social media page." Now, what does that mean when they say they couldn't write a comment? A lot of times it could be a comment under a post, maybe they couldn't make a post. Maybe they wrote it out, but then they refreshed and they couldn't see it. So you're going to have to kind of drill down into what exactly is the issue and how that translates into your service, because that's a crook. So you want to make sure you have the actual perpetrator of a crime. Um, so often you might look at a ticket and you see it like, oh, I could write comments. So then there's any number of reasons why that could happen. So you have to make sure that you get down to who or what is the root cause of the problem, because you don't want to be resolving a ticket and then come back a couple of days later to the same issue again. That's not going to look good on you, and you're going to want to really throw these guys away. Once you close a ticket, you don't want to reopen. Make sure you get down to what is the actual problem. And once you kind of have these two steps, and I think this goes into the guides and the preparation that goes into building out these customer support teams, a lot of times you're going to have guides that are going to help you identify what's the impact, help you identify what are possible problems. And if you don't find those in the guides, you're going to have to update them yourselves. Really, this is kind of a game of like continuous improvement, and there's like a lot of things like you can go. Ideally, you wouldn't even have like a customer support service. Your service will be able to handle all the problems. Of course, in reality, it's a little bit more difficult just by the nature of how long it takes to develop all these things. But at the very least, when you're on the rotation, you have time. Update the guides, make sure you identify new scenarios, new ways to break down the instance that you have addressed. And this could even go into like the monitors and metrics that are published. As a software developer, you really like the bar is really high. Like there's nothing you can't really touch here. So in this case, yeah, look at metrics that'll help you identify a problem, monitors, maybe they're firing off unhealthily when they are healthy. Really take the mind to improving the structure because you don't want to go and solve the thing day after day after day. Once it's solved, make a new process to address it, and then someone else can take it on. After you see what the crook took and you booked it, now we're kind of going to like a live scenario. So maybe you're going to have you'll be a cloud service provider. You're going to need to get on a call within like 15 minutes of the problem happening. And I'm calling this when things get ugly. And this is kind of a way to think about what to do on the call because in this case, you're really not wanting to try everything new. You want to just follow protocol and try to address the customer problem as quickly as possible. So when things get ugly, first, you're going to want to understand the situation. Same thing as your day to day. Your customer is going to say they couldn't write comments and millions of their customers couldn't write comments. Now, you want to be really specific about what that is because comments might have go through like several different systems and you're going to want to know exactly where the problem is. And once you understand that, number two, you get to the G, gauge the impact. There's a kind of tension between, I guess, the developers and customers because you have to really be addressing the most important problem of the day. And yeah, this will depend on what the impact is. So if it's in the middle of the night, you actually probably do not want to be doing too many things if there isn't an impact. The worst thing you can do is to get on a call in the middle of the night. There's like a minor thing that's happening, and then you go on, try to fix it, and then the whole tower falls down. So if you can, if it's like affecting one customer, for instance, and maybe they're okay with delaying it to the next day, try to do that. But if you are seeing massive impact, this is something you have to work out with your team because a lot of services have very specific service level agreements. For instance, they have in a year like 99.9% availability. This can go on to like 99s. So if this is some kind of like established agreement of like how available your service is, then yeah, you're going to have to address it on time. Then I would say go to number three. Now you want to try to address the problem. And a lot of times you're going to have still the TSG as usual. The specific difference between this and your day-to-day is that I would say like if you can't like find out what to do in like 20 minutes, you go from L to Y really quickly. In 20 minutes, no progress is being made, you don't know what to do, then yelp for help. You're going to have to call them back up. You might have a backup on call. You might know who the expert is, but you're going to want to call people and get a lot of people online because you're not going to want to sit there like trying to figure things out. Your customer is not going to want to sit there watching you try to figure things out. You want to get to the problem as quickly as possible and go through it. You can follow up with like your learnings later, but really the critical thing is to mitigate any problem that is happening at a time. But yeah, I mean, that's when things get ugly. And after that, this is where the meat of the situation goes. So this is back to engineering. You're going to see these instances and you want to address any problems that, come about. That's why I was saying during the day-to-day, you want to be updating monitors, troubleshooting guides, maybe go and file some bug repairs. That would be what to do. So review what's going on and see if there's anything better you can do. So I guess two and three is kind of a small difference, but two, if there's actually any major problems, you're going to want to adjust them further. But in number three is also a matter of improving the process. It's like what I said, like the TSG is going to be like the easiest thing to update, but the worst thing to do in terms of, well, I would say is the worst thing to do, but it's going to be like the kind of small step in the right direction. Really, the most ideal thing is that you can run your service forever without taking any action. And in that case, there's a lot of things along that path of what to do. At the smallest end, you're going to have TSGs. You can add on automations that fire off when you encounter a problem like that, or improve your service so like this problem will never happen ever. So those are kind of things to look out for after an incident. You're going to want to improve your service and make sure that things like this doesn't happen again. So I think that pretty much covers like all there is to do with like the instance day to day getting calls. And I would say like what to expect. I've actually worked in a few different environments, so actually not everyone's going to be getting calls in the middle of the night if you're working customer support. Once when I was working at school, we weren't like super strict about when you get a reply. Maybe that's not a thing to like follow. Um, Pretty much you get in tickets and then you respond as things come along. So pretty much just when you're on the job. I think at the time I was paid hourly, so it's not like I'm going to be expected to get called in the afternoon. So at number two, we have online retail, and I would say that this is a little bit of a happy medium between one and three, because certain elements of online retail has to have 24/7 availability like a cloud service provider, and some of it is not as urgent. So if we're looking about purchasing goods, then that's something that's going to have to be online all the time. So you want to do your cart, your checkout actions, pretty much browsing the store. That's everything that has to have 24/7 SLA. Now, when we get into the back side, after you place the order, I would say even like placing the order is going to have 24/7 availability. But when we talk about like handling the order, that's something that can be uh, have a delay and take a little more time. So things like shipping and then alerts to alert the user, like those can take a little bit of time. And a lot of times they do take time because when it comes to shipping, you're going to have people working or robots working in the background to get those ready. But for the most part, the SLA for, I guess, Amazon, for instance, is going to be from anywhere between 1 day to weeks, depending on what the order is. So to get that prime shipping down to like 1 day, there is going to be some SLA that they have from just the boxing, but you can say that the placing the order workflow, it could take a little bit longer. It doesn't have to happen within seconds. Maybe it can even happen within an hour, and that'll be fine. But once you like creep over into like cloud service providers or like 24/7 services, you're going to have times where you need to address problems within 20 minutes. You're going to have to get on the call and mitigate them within an hour. That's really the expectation. And that's the toughest environment to be in. Usually the standard is also very high. When I was talking about 99.9% availability. Yeah, so at 99.9% availability, what we're looking at every year is going to be less than 9 hours of downtime per year. So if you're any like if you're familiar with any service that has goes out offline for like a couple of days, like that's not going to cut it for all of these cloud providers. Even you could say like 99.9% availability is not very high. Sometimes we go into the 4 nines or even the 5 nines availability for a cloud service provider. And this can have some consequences just based on like contracts you fill out. So a lot of times they'll refund credits or even give customers like a kickback. I guess not a kickback, but they'll pay them back for their time because obviously businesses running their services on there, they expect to generate more revenue than the cost of a service. But maybe like the refund is like what they would get. But that's kind of like a business side of things. So I think this pretty much covers all there is to do at a high level about on-call customer support. So I think I'll provide like a little scorecard down below in the link so you can kind of get an idea of where you're at in terms of your preparedness for your next on-call shift. And please let me know what you think. If you have any questions or any ideas about it, please let me know and I'll get back to you. So thank you and I'll see you later.